Hello everyone and welcome to another Pokemon Pocket video. Today we're going to be doing a meta/tournament review of Ursaday's Pocket Weekly Tournament that happened, as you can see, on the 9th of November. This was one of, if not the biggest Pokemon tournament we've had so far, in terms of sort of just raw numbers. And just to go over the format very quickly, it was 8 rounds of Swiss, best of 3, single deck. Into then a top 16 cut to be able to then work out a winner after that, which was single elimination. So we will be checking out the list, we'll be checking out overall meta trends and performance, but we'll also be touching on a key question I think is going to become very important shortly, which is this the best format for tournaments for this game? But we'll get to that a little bit later. So before we dive into all the decks, of course, just a shout out to Ursaday doing a great job of running some really big community tournaments. And make sure to go to play.limitless.com to check out tons of pocket tournaments, as well as tournaments for other games, of course. But this is where the majority of the pocket tournaments are sort of taking place, where you can sign up for them and so on. And I'll put links to like Ursaday's stream, links to this tournament, and so on, under the video. So don't worry about any of that for now. Let's dive into it though, as we take a look at first the Swiss round results and the overall metagame and how that has sort of shaken out. So to no one's surprise, Pikachu EX, Zapdos EX, and then Mewtwo EX Gardevoir, you've probably heard of these decks before, take up the vast majority of the meta, with that sort of a 46-47% share here. However, if you just take a look over here, there are other Pikachu EX decks as well. So it's just important to bear in mind we can add, what, 3, 6, 7, 8, more or less 9. So probably like a 30%, well, just over 30% and a 24%. So you're looking at over half of the submissions were basically Pikachu EX or Mewtwo EX, which honestly, yeah, makes sense. It's the easiest decks for people to aim for when opening packs in the first couple of weeks of the game. They are fairly straightforward decks, especially Mewtwo. Pretty easy to build, straightforward to play, and they're just overall quite good. And that's really important because I'm sure someone in chat will correct me, but with this many players, the idea or the outcome was roughly, with 8 rounds of Swiss, if you go 8-0, you go through to top 16, of course, but as far as I understood it, basically the only loss you were able to sort of take and still have a chance to make top cut was a loss in exactly the final round. And even then, you weren't exactly guaranteed to get through. So I'm sure someone will do all the maths and work it out maybe better than I did, but that was my understanding. So basically, if you lost anything before round 8, you were not making top cut because there were just so many players. So in that instance, when you are playing single deck with tons of rounds of Swiss, you want a deck that's just going to, on average, perform better than most. We can take a look at the other decks as well that weren't just the top 2, as there were some other decks that were pretty popular. So we have, of course, Charizard Moltres EX, which probably gained popularity recently. Again, it sort of goes up and down in waves, that deck. We have Starmie EX Articuno EX. Now, if you know me, not the biggest Articuno EX enjoyer in the world, so not a huge fan of that one. Arbok Weezing, I am a huge fan of, and that seems to be, at least fairly popular with players. Ninetales Rapidash, definitely aggro, sort of Blaine style effect. And then, obviously, more Pikachu variations. And then a little bit of Marowak Sandslash, a little bit of Marowak Primeape with the new Mankey. And then, after Venusaur, we start to get into, like, yeah, people are submitting things, but once you get below 10, it's kind of just sure. We see a few Weezing combinations, of course, a bit of Venusaur, but there's nothing that really sticks out as anything mind-blowing that had any sort of big impact, apart from maybe this one, which was Gengar EX, which had a 56% win rate, to be fair, so maybe not so bad. Maybe there's something there. However, we will, of course, be focusing on those top lists. So what we can do is take a look at some sort of specific decks here to see if anything stands out. So, of course, we do have the Pikachus here. We'll get into certain players' decks in a minute. But if we take a quick look at this, as you can imagine, yeah, this isn't the 4 Zapdos build. It's just Pika EX, Zapdos EX ×2, and then Zeb Strikers. And I think that's a big thing with Pikachu right now is How do you build it to be the overall like best all-rounder? What we can do for now though is just check out some of the sort of good performers in terms of the Swiss in relation to their bring rate, of course. So we will ignore some of these as we look at this by win rate, because obviously, yeah, we had a Moltres EX Ninetales deck that went 7-3. However, it was a single deck. So it was a single deck, one player doing a good run, Shirotori by the looks of things. We can take a quick look at the list, maybe something to inspire a little bit. And it's something I've kind of played with as well. It's the one Rapidash double Ninetales Moltres. And Moltres might look a little bit slow for this kind of deck. However, because you don't need to stack tons of energy on your other Pokemon, you can be a little bit faster. And with the X speeds, you can either sort of put pressure on with Moltres, or just X-speed the Moltres out once you've juiced a Ninetales or Ponyta, and start just blitzing with Blaine, right? So yeah, these types of decks can be really, really strong. We had Executor Beedrill coming in with only a 5-3 score, so I say only, definitely not bad in any way. Not quite making the top cut, of course, but these are kind of interesting lists, which is straight up double Executor EX into two Beedrill lines with the Ericas to keep it going, Sabrina's to pull stuff out, and really just the potions and Ericas just to keep things tanky. Because when you look at Beedrill, maybe a little bit underplayed, obviously a sort of secondary evolution Pokemon, you've always got to have a really good reason for including them. However, 120 health on the Beedrill, 160 health on the Executor. If you have a second Beedrill, they'll have to hit through two of those and an Executor to win, potentially. And with the two Ericas, two potions, I can see how this deck can just sort of whittle opponents down, especially if you can flip some good heads on, on those decks, which will be pretty strong, of course. We do have an Executor Victory Bell brought by a few more players, although only one player managed to make it work here. I'll make it work, pretty well, which again, fairly straightforward list, as you can see there. And looking at the rest of the list, there's some really interesting ones when you look at like Dodrio Jolteon went 6-4, which yes, 60% is amazing, but obviously it's a very small sample size. However, Dodrio Jolteon did not get wrecked in a Pikachu meta, which is pretty interesting, actually. So it's Eevee. Oh, this will be a fan favorite for sure. Two Jolteon, one Flareon with the two Eevees, of course. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to run more than two Eevees. And then the double Doduo Dodrio. Pretty good, really fast deck, relatively low energy cost. And I imagine, of course, that they were running electric and fire energy to have a chance to sort of give that Flareon at least something to go on. But yeah, really, really strong. I'd be interested how this deck worked with Vaporeon and a Misty instead. However, looking at this, I think the name of the game is speed, speed, speed. You want to get high damage out very, very quickly. So really cool deck there, and it did okay, right? Like if we look at the list and look at the performance, they went 6-4 in again a Pikachu heavy meta, so that's pretty good overall. So yeah, there are definitely some cool lists. Again, I will put the link to this below the video so you guys can check it out at your leisure. I did just want to highlight some overall strong decks. I think the key point before we get into the top 16 cut here is probably the key discussion point for deck submission is this list, which is Pika EX Raichu. And as you can see, there was a lot of games being played. The 28 players brought this, 51% win rate overall. And this obviously is going to include Pika mirrors and even actual mirrors here. But if you look at the actual deck list, if I can go back here, one of the reasons this deck is so good is the Raichu often beats the mirror. Right, because Raichu can one-tap any Pokemon that's played in the mirror, and it's also just a one sort of prize point Pokemon, which means you've got some leeway on how to use your Pika EX. So that's the main difference here. Like normally Pika EX or Zapdos are like trying to do damage, but you're gonna have to like hit another Pikachu twice. You're gonna have to hit another Zapdos twice to be able to take it out, even with a full bench. Whereas Raichu allows you to just go, actually, maybe lose this Raichu, but take out one of your EX Pokemon with it. Maybe, and more than likely using that to end the game. And it's very, very strong. So this was definitely a meta call to sort of win the mirror match. Now, does this make you a lot worse in other matchups? Maybe, and that's something you obviously take a little bit of a gamble with. But as you can see, we had, a 9-1-1, 8-2, 8-2, 8-2. 7-3, 7-3, 7-3. Like a lot of like good scores here overall. So not bad runs whatsoever. We will now, of course, go into that top cut and see how how it shook out. And as we can see here, we had oh, I won't really do it by win rate. Let's do it by share. So we had 9 Pikachu EX Zapdos EX making it, 2 Mewtwo Gardevoirs, 2 Charizard Moltres, 1 Pika Zebstrika, 1 Pika Raichu, and then 1 Ninetales Rapidash going in. So again, shock horror, Pikachu dominating this meta in this tournament. So we can see, of course, as always, dominated by Pika EX, and although I see people, wanting nerfs or bans or whatever, things like that, I actually think this raises a really important question that can be answered by the tournament organizers, which is this the best format for Pokemon Pocket? And I believe it is not. I think single deck format is not the way to go, honestly. I completely understand the upsides of single deck is when the game just comes out and people are collecting cards, it's easier to make one deck than it is to make 2 decks, right? Or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 decks, right? It doesn't matter. So I do completely understand that. And initially, I completely get the single deck format so more people can just compete in tournaments. However, I do think it leads to this outcome where all the decks that are doing well, mainly Pika EX, are the decks that are just, yeah, it's just averagely good against everything. Then you've got to just play well, right? That's it. Like you've got to play well and get a bit lucky, right? Which is every card game. Whereas if we played a format like 2-deck Conquest, for example, I think that would really improve not only the meta in tournaments, but also the experience for a lot of players. Just in case you don't know what Conquest is or what 2-deck Conquest is you would submit 2 deck lists that cannot share Pokemon, and you have to win a match best of 3 with each of your decks, which means if you win game 1 with your Pikachu deck, you have to play the other deck in games 2 and 3 if required. Like, you basically have to win once with each of your deck to win the match. And what this does is create options for wider deck building, right? And a much larger variety of decks. Because I'll tell you now, I think if people just submit Pikachu Mewtwo as their 2 decks, I think they'll get stomped, honestly. So I think this would open up a lot more of a wider meta. It's way more strategy involved because suddenly you can be weak to one deck and just win the other decks, right? Because your opponent's deck, like, one of them's allowed to win and you can still win the match, right? So you won't just lose to Pika unless you also lose to Pika and what their other deck is. And if so, you've got a bad lineup into their lineup, right? So you're kind of getting punished for that, which is fine. Although obviously games are still winnable. So I do think that 2-deck Conquest best of 3 is a much better way to play this game in a competitive setting, and I think, well, hopefully tournament organizers are going to move on to that, and now we're getting to the point where players, even new players, can like build multiple decks, because also you don't have to bring like 2 decks with full EX Pokemon and all that. There are tons of decks that don't use a lot or don't use any EX that are very good in a format where you're allowed to submit multiple decks and you're allowed to lose to something as well, which is very key. So yeah, that's just a little offshoot we went on there about tournament formats, and it would just get away from, guess what, yeah, Pikachu's the best all-round deck in the game. It's going to win a tournament where you need to just win matches consistently, which is where it's at, right? When it's just one deck versus one deck. So yeah, anyway, going back to how this one shook out, we of course the many Pikachus, the Mewtwo's, Charizard, and the one the one Ninetales Rapidash here. So these were all pretty interesting. We can see the winner was in fact Saitama. And these were the matchups. Again, you can look at all of this on the site. They basically got a tie here against the Mewtwo Gardevoir in the Swiss round. Although apparently this was 10 Swiss rounds. That's apologies. I thought it was 8 Swiss rounds. I guess they added more. Fair enough. So yeah, I didn't know they played what was that? 10 Swiss rounds. Okay. So I don't know what happened. I was in bed. by the time this was ending yesterday. So maybe they added some more Swiss rounds to help out. But we can, of course, check out the deck. I think it's a fairly straightforward one. Double Pika EX, double Zapdos EX, the two Zeb Strikers, which again I think are very flexible, and then the Pink Urchin, which, as anyone who knows me, I'm a fan of Paralyze and these kind of effects. So the Pink Urchin there just as a nice backup and can sort of steal you certain games that you were maybe losing if you can just Paralyze a Pokemon at the right time. Very, very, very strong. So no big surprise, if I'm being completely honest, that it was this that won. A Japanese player by the looks of things, so it's pretty cool to see. And then taking a look at the rest of them, I think, yeah, it was a Pikachu mirror. However, this one does not have the Pink Urchin, so maybe that's what made the difference. So yeah, again, you can look through all of these. I will check out the, who was it? I think it was, let me just double check who played the Ninetales. Okay, so the Ninetales was Capca. Fantastic streamer. Check him out. He's a friend of mine. Does streaming and YouTube. So yeah, make sure to check Cap out. Really cool guy. And he actually got there, made top cut with Rapidash, Ninetales, Farfetch. So super cool to see. And yeah, that's again, that's a pretty cheap deck you can build. And then if we were playing Conquest, like you think, okay, well this is an aggro deck that does well. Can I bring something else that can do well against the meta and then maybe take over? So pretty cheap deck to build there. Made top 16 in a huge tournament with Pikas and Mewtwo's and everything else rife across the meta. So it just goes to show that you don't need, you know, tons of these hard to get or harder to get expensive cards to make there. So yeah, congratulations to Cap. That's pretty cool. So yeah, overall, really cool tournament. Good to see at least, you know, a good chunk of people. I say a good chunk. Enough people bring in a variety of decks, even though it didn't work out. However, as I mentioned, I do think that if we played Conquest, best of 3, you would see a lot more variety in decks and lineups, and it 100% would not just be Pika Mewtwo at the top. I will guarantee that as a fact. So hopefully, if any of these tournament organizers are watching this, they maybe try it out just to see how it looks. I do think it would be a better experience for everyone. However, super cool to see such a big tournament. It's fantastic to see so many people interested, because even though I love just, you know, just playing the game as a game, my soul is embedded in esports. So yeah, it's definitely great to see a tournament scene really, really, really strong this early with Pokemon Pocket. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you next time.